I would like to declare this conference of Opera Europa open and to say how thrilled we all are at Opera Europa finally, after 2 years, to be meeting again in purpose. And we have a huge thank you to make for this happening. To everyone here in Bergamo who have kept the faith after the postponement from last year. They were determined to make it work this year. And I would like to record our appreciation for everyone here, from the Comune di Bergamo, from the Università di Bergamo, from Azienda Trasporti Bergamo, who have made it possible to travel around the city free for our delegates, for the Biblioteca Civica Angelo Mai, the Fondazione Bergamo nella Storia, and to Marco Mazzoleni, all of whose contributions and support we very much appreciate. We are in this amazing building thanks to the university, and I would like to call on Elisabetta Bani, who is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Bergamo.
Dear Opera Europa delegates, officials, participants, it is with great pleasure and a great deal of emotion that I welcome you on behalf of the Chancellor of Bergamo University, Professor Sergio Cavalieri, and myself as Vice Chancellor for the University's third mission and community relations, to this inaugural Opera Europa Autumn Conference 2021. Sorry for my English, probably the same as Mr. Roberto Benigni. The university's new board has just been sworn in. We took up our posts this Monday, and we are happy to start this new mandate by hosting the first of the meetings beginning today in the university's Aula Magna, Sant'Agostino, and ending on the 21st of November in Bergamo, and due to be attended by more than 200 delegates from all over Europe. This Bergamo event is, l'ha detto, Opera Europa's third general conference to take place in Italy, and the first to take place in person after COVID restriction came to an end. It will be an important occasion for reflection around opera, of course, but as we know, opera is multiplicity of things. It is art, culture, professionalism, entrepreneurship, passion. Opera requires joint working by a wide range of skills. It requires the contribution of artists, of many different types of artists, business people, skilled staff, and public bodies. This reflection on opera's future can thus be considered to be an effective testing ground for thinking on all of our futures. The future of entrepreneurship, the future of university, the future of our society. The need for dialogue and cooperation between economics and culture, the private sector and the institutions, between doing, the world of doing, and research, has never been greater than it is today. What is needed is a long-term vision, requiring abstract thought, which at the same time responds to present problems, requiring a practical solution. The university is open to these challenges and ready to drink the elixir of life, which will be offered us during this conference with you all. So, cheers. May you all enjoy this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elisabetta Bani. Much appreciated welcome. And now I would like to call on a good friend of the festival and indeed of Opera Europa, Giorgio Gori, Mayor of Bergamo.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, it is a pleasure to have you here today and to welcome you to Bergamo. I would like to thank the University of Bergamo for hosting us in such a prestigious and historically rich venue. And I would like to greet the Vice Chancellor, Professor Elisabetta Bani. I would also like to greet the Director of Opera Europa, Nicolas Payne, whom I thank for having carried out the idea conceived 3 years ago right here in Bergamo during the event on the cities of composers of hosting Opera Europa in Italy and in particular here in our city. This is a particularly happy occasion for us since in the meantime an Italian has been elected as president of Opera Europa. Anna Maria Meo, General Director of the Teatro Regio di Parma and Artistic Director of the Verdi Festival, whom I would like to greet with affection, since among other things, we share the mission of preserving and promoting the heritage of two of the most important composers of all times. After 2 very difficult years for the whole continent and for our territory in particular, we finally meet today at the first Opera Europa live conference again, on the occasion of the 2021 Donizetti Opera Festival, of which we are very proud. The program includes 4 different productions in the city's 2 gorgeous theaters, the Teatro Sociale, here in the Upper Town, and the Donizetti Theater in the Lower Town, recently restored to its splendor after major restoration works. We hope to welcome you in the best possible way. We are proud to be part of Opera Europa with 200 theaters and festivals from all over the continent. Over the last few years, Bergamo has carried out an extensive series of initiatives to become more and more international, in line with the growth of our airport, which is now the 3rd largest in the country in terms of passenger traffic. From being designated UNESCO Creative City of Gastronomy to the inclusion of our Venetian walls in the UNESCO World Heritage List, to the G7 Agriculture Summit that we hosted in 2019, and finally to being elected together with Brescia, Italian Capital of Culture 2023. In the next few days, you will address very important topics related to the governance of the opera field, such as training the next generation of artists and cultural managers. Opera production is very expensive, so we also need good managers, as well as composers and musicians and singers, to ensure the sustainability of this field through alliances and co-productions. To the directors of European theaters and festivals, and to all of you here in Bergamo today, I wish a pleasant stay in our city, whose beauty I hope you will appreciate, and above all, I wish you a very good Donizetti opera. Buon lavoro e viva la musica!
Thank you so much, Mayor Giorgio Gori. I'm sure your job has many difficulties, but on a day like this, I think some of us are rather envious of your position as mayor of this beautiful city. And it's a great pleasure to be your guests here. I want to turn now to the force behind this invitation to be in Bergamo, which of course is our dear friend Francesco, who has helped transform this festival over the last years and who has led it through, let us face it, a rather difficult period. But here he is smiling, about to premiere one of his productions and indeed his festival. And Francesco Micheli, over to you.
I'm overexcited, so good afternoon, everyone. There are no words to tell you how happy I am to be here in front of you. It sounds perhaps like a cliché. I feel a bad sound, I don't know why. Perché ci sono due microfoni, sì. Now it's better? Is it better? I feel you can think that it sounds like a cliché, but I hope you believe this, and I think you'll understand why my feeling is genuine. We were all supposed to be here last year. We should have been here for the reopening of this theater. We had been waiting for you for a long time. We had prepared for it.
Come on, let's go inside. Restoration works are over and I feel different, inside and out. I'd like to show you how I look now, so I'll be walking with you. It'll be a journey through space and time. But don't worry, we won't get lost. I'll be by your side every step of the way.
2020 was a terrible year for Bergamo. This city, which had managed to avoid even the bombings of the Second World War, came to a standstill in March 2020. The COVID tragedy took it by storm. The images of the theater gutted by the frozen building site of renovation works, whose result you will see tomorrow, and on which we were investing 18 million euros, are among the symbols of this pandemic in our territory.
La città non li poteva più contenere tutti quei morti accumulati in quasi un mese di Covid. 553, 100 in un giorno ieri. Il primo cittadino Giorgio Gori ringrazia i sindaci delle altre città, Bologna come Modena. In un momento così tragico, scrive loro, la vostra vicinanza è encomiabile. Bergamo, Western capital of COVID. Bergamo is the Italian city with the lowest life expectancy in Italy in 2020, with an average age of 79.6 years and a drop of 4.8 years compared to 2019. In 2020, 6,300 more people died in the province of Bergamo than the average of previous 5 years, 63% more. As an artist, never in my life had I experienced so much how difficult it is to do my job. You know, in the darkest moment, I even
thought I would never do it again. The seriousness of what we were going through made me see my work as irrelevant. Yet at that very moment, it was important to try to keep up the sense of our heart and be ready. And the opportunity actually came very soon.
Qui a Bergamo questa sera c'è l'Italia che ha sofferto, che è stata ferita, che ha pianto e che, volendo riprendere appieno i ritmi della vita, sa di non poter dimenticare quanto è avvenuto. La mia partecipazione vuol testimoniare la vicinanza della Repubblica ai cittadini di questa terra, così duramente colpita. Bergamo oggi rappresenta l'intera Italia, il cuore della Repubblica, che si inchina davanti alle migliaia di donne e di uomini uccisi da una malattia ancora in larga parte sconosciuta e che continua a minacciare il mondo dopo averlo costretto improvvisamente a fermarsi o comunque a rallentare le sue attività.
The many people who had died in our land had not been buried, a right which, like any right, is fundamental to give meaning to experiences that often don't have it. We couldn't go on without a right. We had to say goodbye to our dead. Many images were coming from Bergamo in those terrible months. The one that is perhaps more indelible in the eyes of the whole world is the procession of coffins of bodies that had died alone. In that same place, on 28th of June 2020, we sang a farewell song, Gaetano Donizetti's Requiem. It was broadcast live in prime time by National TV Rai Uno. Una messa per I morti, sì. A mass for the dead that is less spectacular than others, because it's choral. But the tragedy that hit on us was choral too. We buried our dead with music. We performed the rite, and from that moment on, our city could start again. This perhaps is what we've learned about art. It's a fragile creature that must be protected and supported. Yet, in moments of extreme difficulty, art can be invincible and prove its full strength. In October 2020, productions returned to theaters to welcome back audiences in November, even though with reduced venue capacity. The government, however, rightly decided to close the entertainment venues again. At that point, the only solution seemed to be to stop and postpone everything until the following year. After all, live shows need an audience, we know. But it was the audience that asked us not to give up. First and foremost, the citizens of this city that was still mourning. Within a few days, we came up with a web TV, the Donizetti web TV, today called Donizetti Opera Tube. This channel has a real program schedule for a much larger audience than the real one. Over
2,200 paying subscribers and 3,000 registered users from 41 different countries from Europe, USA, Australia, South America and South Africa.
Ciao Gaetano, scusa, mi tolgo la mascherina, tanto guarda, io e te siamo immunizzati, io ho fatto il Covid, tu hai fatto un paio di colera, quindi siamo a posto. Senti, arrivo da Brescia, trafelatissimo, sì lo so, sono di Brescia, non siamo tutti perfetti, comunque dai, cerca di portare pazienza. Quest'anno siamo molto felici di poter ritornare nel teatro a te dedicato, è stato un lavoro grandissimo di ristrutturazione e adesso siamo qui provando Marino Faliero e il Belisario, che sono le due opere che dirigo io quest'anno.
Riccardo Frizza, my lovable partner in this festival. Grazie Riccardo. In those strange, claustrophobic and at the same time exhilarating days, in the muffled solitude of my theater, I came to a reflection that I would like to share with you, my friends. The 19th century was the golden age of opera, of the repertorio, but it was also a century of great epidemics. In 1835, Lucia di Lammermoor made its debut in Naples, and cholera was raging through the city. That opera, imbued with malaise, death, and blood, was staged while disaster was all around. Pain brought the past and the present together and prompted us to reflect on the need we all have for art, and especially opera today. I mean, Donizetti Opera is a typical monographic festival. We have an international and usually elite audience. But in recent months, I'd better say, unfortunately, in recent years, I realized how much everyone needs him, Donizetti, Gaetano Donizetti, and especially young people. The pandemic made me realize how similar past and present are, even with chronological coincidences. 1789, French Revolution. 200 years later, 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall. These are moments when a different world seems possible, and yet, 1814, Congress of Vienna, 2001, Twin Towers attack. New centuries opened with frightening experiences that plunged the whole world into fear. Gaetano Donizetti was born in 1797. He was a child of his time, a young man growing up with the disillusionment of a great revolution that seemed to have failed in its purposes. So, he set to music stories of young people who don't feel at ease in the reality in which they are living and struggle to be their true selves. Donizetti thus gave new music and new dreams to young people all over Europe who were hungry for a future. 2 centuries later, the situation isn't much different. That's why I do believe that young people today can love those stories and that music with the same hunger for a meaning that their peers had 200 years ago. Since 2017, we've been carrying on the Donizetti 200, Donizetti 200 project. Every year, we give new life to a chapter of Gaetano's artistic and human biography. We started from Bologna, the city of his training, and from his first opera, Il Pigmalione, dedicated to his master, Johann Simon Mayr. Mayr is a key figure in Gaetano's life. Johann Simon Mayr had completed his training in Bergamo, and after many triumphs in Italian theaters, he decided to give back what he had received here by creating le lezioni caritatevoli, the charitable lessons, a true music school of very incredible high level for the poor children of the choir of the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. Please visit this monument, amazing. Among them were the Donizetti brothers, Gaetano and Giuseppe. We know Gaetano's story, but perhaps we don't know that Giuseppe, after an adventurous life, became head of Turkish military music, made Pasha by the Sultan. because of the attention of Simone Maier. The relationship between Gaetano and Simone Maier would always be a special one, even at the most difficult times, such as in 1821, exactly 200 years ago. So much so that the two are buried together, side by side, in the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore. Donizetti was unemployed after his first not very exciting debuts, struck with a sort of working crisis, like many of his colleagues at the time. So he returned to his hometown, Bergamo. Johann Simon Maier was also in town. He was preparing Medea in Corinto. This opera had a very successful debut in 1813 at the San Carlo Theatre in Naples. The maestro readapted the great masterpiece for the small theatre in Bergamo. We can easily imagine that Donizetti might have been involved in the production, who knows in what capacity. We see this as another powerful symbolic image of 2021. And it's perhaps also the symbol of our festival and, more generally, of the meaning of opera now. To give space on stage and in the audience to young men and women who are struggling to find meaning in their lives and their space in the world. After all, this is what the works we are staging this year are about, at least in the way we want to tell them. Meden in Corinto, with the libretto by Felicia Romani, yet another version of the myth, very different from the best known one. Many have told the story of a desperate woman, but the element all these versions share is that there are two children to whom no one has given a voice and to whom we want to give a voice. Like those young people who don't feel at ease in their skin and who, like Nemorino, again in a libretto by Felicia Romani, feel the need to ask for help. Nemorino himself, however, ends up relying on a bad teacher, the illusion peddler Dulcamara. The opera's Elixir of love is a real drug, a substance that the young man takes in the hope to appear better than he is. Like often young people use this, I don't know, cocaine, ketamine, MDMA, but precisely this desperate vitality, as Pierpaolo Pasolini would put it, is the real elixir of life that he produces in great quantities. The young people in Bergamo in 2021 come from the province like Marie Antonio, the protagonists of La Fille du Régiment, which have co-produced with the Teatro Lírico Nacional de Cuba con un montón de energía de duende, who have come a long way in search of their own. The heroic and Olympic times of the classical age are gone. Donizetti's romantic heroes are girls and boys with nothing heroic, just like the young survivors of these lockdowns. Because in the context in which such people live, mere survival is often already an act of resistance. We must think first and foremost about them in the time ahead. Therefore, by simply following Gaetano's example, we are constantly looking for a violent confrontation with our time and its languages. This is why we created Citofonare Gaetano, Gaetano Calling, a light-hearted salon on our web TV, where one of Italy's best-known radio DJs, Diego Passoni, comments on the operas in streaming with guests, mixing words and languages. Maier, the outstanding German composer who retired to Bergamo to teach, discovered Donizetti thanks to this charitable lesson, a school for poor children just like him. Yes, just like him, today, another maestro from Bergamo, Alex Esposito, is helping us to train new Donizettian singers through the Bottega Donizetti. We've selected 6 wonderful and talented young singers
that you will admire tonight. We are working with over 6,000 students. After the experience of the pandemic, we've created the Opera Wow project with the aim of turning Gaetano's works into a tool to interpret reality, to focus on the people in need, to undertake a path of psychological recovery. And we leave no one aside, with the new video projects translated into Italian Sign Language. Gaetano never experienced the strict segregation between genres that is typical of our time. For example, when he discovered French opera dance music in Paris, he immediately adapted and included in his works Don Pasquale, for example. So, today, we've invited 10 of the most important DJs in Europe to create a featuring with Gaetano. This new compilation is now on Spotify and iTunes. I believe that we have all come up with something to survive our reclusion, my friends. And I think that this edition of Opera Europa could be an important opportunity to discuss innovative formats. For all this reason, we need to dialogue with new technologies, and not just because we are afraid of disappearing or we are trying to capture the headlines. Of course, I guess we do fear disappearing. But our desire to dialogue with the web, with the streaming platforms, with the social networks is genuine. And it's also functional to claiming the immortality of opera. There are images that have struck me since I saw them, as we have seen. There are images from a science fiction film, The Fifth Element. I was 25 years old. I was beginning my journey into the world of opera, and at one point, I saw this film. Do you remember it?
Showtime.
Science fiction film by Luc Besson, the most expensive European production in the history of cinema.
Permission granted for 1 hour. More than I need.
Here, at some point, everyone meets in a spaceship. It's the topical moment with the clash between good guys and bad guys. The director chose the interior of an opera house to represent the spaceship, a truly crazy, incredible place. And the singer, who's an extraterrestrial, sings what? The madness scene from Lucia di Lammermoor. It's these images and sounds that made me intuitively understand the immortality of opera. And simply, day after day, I have tried to find the meaning of this intuition. In this difficult period, such intuitions have turned into a great truth. I feel that each of us, in this year and a half of science fiction like this film, we have made the journey similar to mine. This is why I'm very happy, because it will be wonderful in the next few hours to share and build a new spaceship with which to live for new spaces altogether. Long live opera. Grazie.
Thank you, Francesco, for your inspiring words, but also for your pictures and images, both historical and from last year, which explain more eloquently than words why we wanted to have this renewal conference in Bergamo. Thank you. And also, I'm going to use this opportunity to say thank you to your team, many of whom have contributed towards making this possible. But I must mention especially, because they've been our companions right through the process, Andrea Compagnucci and Floriana Tessitore. I am flanked by the President and Vice President of Opera Europa, and this next session is really theirs. I may say a few words to sweep up at the end, but I would like immediately now to pass the baton to Anna Maria Meo, Presidente of Opera Europa.
Thank you, Nicolas. Grazie. Thank you to all of you for having us. And this, yes, it is a great emotion to be here and to share with all the delegates here the first conference in present. It's really a strange feeling. We were not used anymore to be in present, to be side by side, discussing and sharing thoughts and experience. So it's really a wonderful emotion to be all together again. And the title of the conference is Renewal and Responsibility. And it's not easy to talk about renewal and responsibility in these moments, also considering that we were almost sure, we may say this, we had the feeling that the pandemic could have been over, that we could be much more optimistic about the near future. But what we are hearing the last weeks suggests us that this is not going to be. and that we have in front of us another difficult period. So while we were ready to start again and think on how to program, how to go back and talk to our public, now we have to face probably another difficult period. But still the concept of renewal is essential. We have to think on how we will face this next period and hopefully go back to normality, maybe not so soon, but hopefully in 1 year and a half. And I believe that the concept of renewal and responsibility have undergone an interpretative revolution, as of course a side effect of the pandemic. What was quite clear but implicit until 2019 practically emerged, but I would say almost exploded during the months of the pandemics. And we have to be ready to face, and is absolutely necessary, a completely different situation. We have to develop different strategies, and not only to face further uncertainties, but to be ready to act in a completely different way in the next months and years. And I believe, I will be very brief, but there are 3 points if we want to think practically on how we will face these difficulties. 3 points, 3 keywords. First of all, we have to be aware that we absolutely need to invest in the growth of the workers of our theaters, the professional growth that then means also personal growth. We have to invest in them, all of them, technical staff, administrative staff, and artistic community of our theaters, because we need to make sure that they will be suitable and ready for the new challenges that we will face. We have, of course, to implement innovative processes, but when we think of innovation, suddenly we have in front of us, and the reason can be understandable, streaming platform, for example, because this is what we did in the past years, a couple of years. We feed streaming platform, but the innovation is needed in all fields, in all direction, in all the strategies that we are going to develop. And of course, an innovative process cannot be imposed from the top, from an intendant or an artistic director. It has to be intended as a sprout, I would say, that is planted in a soil, but this soil has to be ready and made fertile before we plant it. So, which concepts are essential? First of all, the sustainability. And when we talk about sustainability, we cannot consider only the economic sustainability, but we have to think of the environmental sustainability, and of course, and maybe more than any other aspect, the social sustainability. We had experienced really extreme situation, and we know that the social aspect were before, but now are absolutely central for the life of our community and for the life of our theater. To do this, we have to be ready to propose and to discuss more flexible trade unions relations, because we will be asked to face different projects, and we can't keep going with this rigid agreement, because they will not allow us to face the new project and the new challenges. And also, this is the third point, we must succeed. We have to be able to dialogue with the public institution, those who give us the more significant part of our economical resources, in order to see fully recognized the effort planning innovative approach for our activities. Because I don't know if this is probably Italian theater are in a little bit more difficult situation than others, but we still are asked to demonstrate what we do for our territories and to be evaluated for our activities only showing numeric parameters. We are asked to say how many performances, how many people sitting in the hall, how many artists we employ, how many. There are numbers. We all know that are essential, but cannot be all around numbers. Because the community where our theaters work and produce their project are not the same. We have a law that is dated 1967. I did my degree on that law. So 54 years ago. In these years, this law has been modified in very side lateral aspect, not essential, a kind of maquillage every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. But how can we afford to be judged and then to be supported observing the rules of a law that is 54 years old? Which kind of society was the society of 1967, and what the territories, the community were expecting from the theaters at that age? Everything has changed, and even if we don't consider the pandemic, is a completely different world. So we must be strong enough and determined to ask the public bodies who support our activities to change the rules, because otherwise there will be always a distance from our wishes, from all of us being aware of what is needed today and the obligation of following the path of laws that are too old and not anymore acceptable for all of us. So when we talk about renewal and responsibility, I strongly believe that we have to work on these three key points: growth, professional growth, that also means personal growth of the workers, new trade unions agreement, and a complete new different dialogue with the public bodies who support us. If we would be able to get to this result, then we would have a base to start from, to think on new projects and challenges, to give back and to legitimate our institution on the community that expect a lot from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for focusing our minds on the themes of this conference and for issuing us with those challenges. If I pass now to Aviel Khan, I think he will probably also offer us some challenges.
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here in Bergamo, finally, physically, and try to restart a real-life discussion, actually, about what is renewal and responsibility. And I wanted to address one point that we will discuss these days, which I feel for every one of us has become more and more an issue that is pressing and very difficult to deal with. We are living in a very fast changing society, and I think has never been as fast changing as it does these days. COVID showed us that filling our auditoriums becomes even more difficult than before. Even if before the reach out to younger audiences, like also Francesco Micheli has, in a nutshell, addressed, has been a big issue. I think today in general, to reconnect the audiences with us, with our old art form, is a big challenge. Not losing the connection with our societies. And I think the future of opera in our cities, in our region, will very much depend on how we show ourselves of relevance, how we are connected and credible as institutions within this society. On the one hand, we try to do that, of course, with wonderful, exciting productions. On the other hand, and that's the issue I want to tackle a bit more here, it's to be credible institutions in today's world. That starts by being led by responsible and conscious people with up-to-date moral and ethical standards in managing those institutions. You addressed the relationship with politicians and with collaborators and unions. I would really talk about the human aspect here, that even through COVID and home offices and distance, human distance has become more complicated. Let's remind ourselves, many of the works we produce, and they talk of higher values and ideals, deeply European ideals of freedom and tolerance. Our cultural institutions are thus seen as a kind of a conscience of an ideally open and diverse society. Do we really stand up to those values as institutions? In time of LGBT, Me Too, Black Lives Matters, environmental concerns, and many other issues, how do we redefine the structures and management of our opera houses and arts institutions? Are we open to diversity? Are we really? How many women are in position of power? How is it with hierarchies in our institutions, let alone often dictatorial management attitudes? How do we deal with harassment, sexual, racist, especially when it comes from artists, famous artists? We know that many of us are far away from having implemented good practices in dealing with this in an ideal of zero tolerance. That's one side. On the other side, how do we stage certain repertoire? Keyword, new taboos. We've all heard of cancel culture. It's a very dangerous issue for us. It talks about censorship. In the same time, how can we stage certain pieces that in today's society are racist, offensive, imperialist, etc.? A big question, I think, for many opera houses, where you have houses in the United States that cannot imagine to stage an Othello anymore in a way opera tradition is used to. In certain other opera houses of the world, you see it in a way that it would be impossible to imagine not to be offensive elsewhere. On the other hand, we have new right-wing conservatism in governments all over Europe, growing stronger, a kind of counter-reality to this. There is fear in certain places where those issues of freedom, of LGBT or Me Too, are censorship when they should be staged by very conservative right-wing nationalist governments. Some colleagues might sit here that have those problems. On the other hand, in other countries, for middle-aged white men, it might become almost impossible to get a job appointed by politicians because it's almost politically incorrect. These are extremes but they are our realities. We have seen several famous artists and fellow colleagues, directors of opera houses of us, being fired from their jobs because of behavior as leaders and colleagues that was not tolerated anymore. Almost daily, there are articles in the press about this. The ballet companies are under target everywhere because actually, finally, long-time suppressed and traumatized dancers dare to speak up against the way their companies are led. I'm sitting in Geneva, and a famous Béjart ballet next door has huge issues and is about to close down because of this. Of course, in all this, there is also the tendency of witch hunt, judging presumably innocent people just because there is a pleasure and blood hunger to destroy them. But we are not living in the 1980s anymore. People to which one should be able to look up as role models, artists, people that lead artistic, publicly subsidized institutions, they need to live up to those tasks from A to Z, and not from A to M. So if we want to convince the younger generations to believe in our art, to come and work in our institutions, to be really enthusiastic for what we propose to them on stage, if we want to convince society and politics that they should invest in our institution a lot of money, we need to clean up, be transparent, and self-critic. The public opinion, how we manage our institutions, is very important. Our existence is not God-given. Otherwise, at least in certain countries or regions, there might be a very rude awakening for our institutions. Opera Europe needs to care about these questions, need to discuss about these questions. We must be a leader as Opera Europe, as organization, to help our members in good practices, in reflections about these topics, how to tackle these very delicate issues best. And we're going to have several panels that address these questions, and of course the aim is that by the end, and I'm not saying by the end of this conference, but by the end of really dealing honestly with these issues, we will all come out stronger of these kind of discussions and more fit for the future of, voila, long live opera. Thank you.
Thank you, Aviel, for voicing concerns which you have already voiced at our board, but quite rightly believe should be discussed and challenged across our whole professional sector. Both Anna and Aviel have laid out some of the points which we will develop over the next 2 days. If you look carefully at the program, you will see that there are opportunities for you too to express your views, ask your questions, challenge your leaders. And the theme of renewal, on the one hand, after this difficult period of close down, and responsibility as institutions towards the public who pay for us, runs like red threads through the whole conference. I sense that this is a moment for reform. No one wished the pandemic to happen, but since it did happen, it has created an opportunity to look inside ourselves and to challenge ourselves and to question some of the things that we've done in the past. And if we think historically, that has often been the moment when opera has reinvented himself. In the 18th century, it was Gluck who said the kind of opera that is being put on in Paris is trash. We need to rethink it, to rediscover una bella semplicità that will make opera purer. In the 19th century, it was Wagner who rightly decried the kind of nonsense that he encountered in the opera house, again in Paris, I'm sorry to say, but elsewhere as well, and invented a new kind of music drama and indeed a new kind of opera house in Bayreuth. And in the 20th century, there are many examples, but I will simply mention the reforms that Arturo Toscanini created at La Scala in the first and third decades of the 20th century, of what Walter Felsenstein did in Berlin with the foundation of the Komischoper after World War II. And more recently, and in our own memories, let us not forget Gérard Mortier and what he did, first of all at La Monnaie in Brussels and then at Salzburg Festival. And as I look for figures like that today, I sense a kind of hesitation to stand up to the plate. Almost an anxiety, which Anna expressed very well at the beginning of this session, that does the audience really want us? What is our place in society? Do we reflect the society in which we live? Do we have validity? And I think it's a nervous moment. To be honest, when I was proofreading the entries for our new production project Bible, which will be discussed later this week, my heart sank when I read some of the entries. It was too much same old stuff. As if the break of the pandemic hadn't taught us anything new. That's a broad judgment, and of course there have been some marvelously inventive things that have happened during the last 18 months and are planned in the future. But it's almost as if we're not quite ready to grasp those opportunities. And that's the purpose of this conference. I'm sorry that Aviel thinks we can't sort it out in 3 days, and he's probably right. But we need to try to make a chance at it. And the program that we have devised is an attempt to open some windows. And I will just mention a few of them, but the idea is not that you should hear any more from me after today's session, but that it's you who should be getting into the car and driving it and asking questions and contributing. It's one of the reasons why we, after the debate tomorrow morning, will have breakout sessions into smaller groups where everyone will be able to have a voice in asking questions or indeed coming up with solutions. We want to give a voice to the next generation of opera managers. It so happens that we have 21 of them here because we've chosen to coincide with the conference the launch of our opera management course. And you will hear more about that from Larry Pokinen in a short while, so I won't go on about it. We want to give a voice to a wider group of artists, to be more inclusive, to be aware of equity and diversity. And we want to challenge fixed positions, the sort of old-fashioned positions which Aviel was describing. And I urge you not to be timid in jumping forward and saying provocative things. We want to give a voice to artists, and we have asked not all the dispossessed artists who have lost contracts over the last 2 years, because that would fill more than this university hall. But we have invited some artists to take part in our debates and to give us the perspective from their point of view rather than from the managerial point of view, so that it can be incorporated in the solutions that we have. As Aviel rather implied, we want to question past hierarchies and dictatorial practices. It's a difficult one. We want to be democratic and give everyone a voice, but ultimately somebody has to make a decision which opera to put on. And there comes a moment where, as a manager, you have the responsibility for making that decision, however carefully you have consulted. And, well, to quote our dear friend Arturo Toscanini, again, who was perhaps a little bit extreme, when he said, "In politics, democracy. In art, dictatorship." I don't think anyone would totally agree with that now, and subsequent conductors have found ways of getting results without being martinets. Nonetheless, I think that those balances are to be questioned. And we need to be more responsible about the world in which we live, about the environment, which is one of the reasons why we have sessions later on in this conference about sustainability and green practices. In conclusion, I simply want to encourage you, dear members of Opera Europa, and even those of you who are not members of Opera Europa, to help us grasp those opportunities over the next few days, so that our careful rapporteurs will be able to notch up action points which will help determine what we plan for Opera Europa over the next 2 years. If any of you survive this conference until the concluding session on Saturday, we will attempt to summarize some of those action points. But I can't tell you what they are now, because I haven't listened to your voice yet. With that, I think I will conclude this little session, thanking very much Anna Meo and Aviel Khan, and ask Lari Pokinen from Finnish National Opera and Ballet in Helsinki, but also a member of Opera Europa's board, to join us on this platform and to introduce our opera management course, what is its purpose, and how it has changed, and to introduce the wonderfully diverse group of 21 participants to whom I was introduced at lunch today. Lari.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, Aviel, and Anna-Maria. Excellent basis for this next session and introduction for the 2021 cohort of opera management course participants. But anyway, good afternoon on my behalf. My name is Lauri Pokkinen. I am the External Relations Manager in Finnish National Opera and Ballet, and I'm also a board member of the Opera Europa. On this stage, I'm also, because I'm the alumni of the opera management course of the cohort of 2015, and it was nice to say hello and exchange familiarity with Thomas, who was my mentor in 2015 management course. Director Nicholas Payne addressed the management course members earlier today and said that the course is all about the dive to the deep end of the opera pool. Certainly it is about that. It also gives a 360-degree view to the business and to the art form. The course is also about the network. The 21 members who take part of the course shall be friends for the rest of their lives, but also beyond with their mentors as well. As an alumni of the course, I advise participants to forget the daily tasks for the time of these conference days. I, of course, very much advise that for the rest of us as well. But anyway, this is really important for the course sake, I think. I had a pleasure earlier to get to know many of them. Many of the course members at the lunch, and only by the lunch I learned about the sustainability development in the Opéra de Paris, the cooperation that Teatro Real is doing with the universities, creating joint courses in leadership, the dramaturgic's possibilities to address these hot topics, diversity, etc., in the core repertory, and also creating content to different audience segments. There is a lot of knowledge and talent in this group, and this only within the lunch. But this is enough about me and my perspectives. I'm happy to now invite the entire cohort of 21 participants of the Management Course 2021 on the stage here in the front of this desk. Please join me on the stage. Now we will have a short showcase of Finnish pronunciation of the European names. And when you, if you recognize your name, then please make yourself present. So we have, in this cohort of 2021, we have Alessia Cirgenti from Teatro Massimo, Italy. We have Anouk Rosier from Opera Zuid, Netherlands. Majid El Bushra, Royal Opera House, UK. Guillaume L'Hôpital, Le Monnaie, Belgium. Müge Altai, Fedora, France. Paloma Alvar Nuno, Teatro Real, Spain. Hannes Föst, Theater Magdeburg, Germany. Laura Rolling, Dutch National Opera. Kate Rooney, Royal Opera House, UK. Cinzia Casace, Teatro Dercio di Parma, Italy. Nils Thibaut Girard, Icelandic Opera. Xolan Marman, SA Opportunity, South Africa. Audrey Brahimi, Opera Orchestre National de Montpellier, France. Benedikt Simonicek, Komissionoper Berlin, Germany. Lukasz Dabrowski, Baltic Opera in Gdansk, Poland. Florian Köffler, Badische Staatstheater Karlsruhe, Germany. Keith Bernard Stonum, Staatsoper Hannover, Germany. Joël Trofler, Grand Théâtre de la Ville, Luxembourg. Celia Grau, Opera Europa, Belgium. Violin Charpie, Opéra Nationale de Paris, France. And the 21st member, Kevin Blersch, Staatstheater Nürnberg, Germany. It's like a Eurovision Song Contest or something, but isn't this amazing bunch of next generation managers in row on this stage? There we have all of the 21 members of the cohort of the Opera Europa Management course. The course takes place in the time, as we heard earlier from Aviel, from Anna-Maria Meo and Nicholas, it takes time when the industry is recovering from the pandemic. But in the same time, it's challenging itself on many frontiers. Many of them, diversity, technical transformation, and sustainability, for example, are also embedded to this conference. The participants shall take important role from now on in this conference. They shall observe and analyze. The findings in the end will be presented, but also put in writing to our newsletter. This session is not intended to give a deep personal or even a professional analysis on each course participant. That would be too convenient for all of you. But to break the ice and make them visually familiar to all of you. Now, I don't challenge the course members, but all of you, to get to know them better throughout the coming days. And secondly, also being open for the observations and insights on the conference themes and the future of our art form and its leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurie, and thank you, Opera Management course participants. I'm only sorry that they were hidden behind face coverings, so you couldn't eye them up, because rest assured they're after your jobs. Or rather, they are after jobs from you. And they were chosen from a rather larger group of applicants by Audrey and Cormac Sims and me. And we believe that each really brings something of interest to contribute to this art form of opera. And as Laurie said, try to get to know one or two of them over the next few days, because I think they will create useful dialogues. They're very hungry for information. They have good questions. And if you say something interesting, they will write it down and it'll be in the report. If you say something boring, they've been instructed to ignore it. I think they are a friendly ear. They're here to learn. They're here to observe, but they are also here to help in the whole process that we are trying to conduct over the next few days of drawing out of the discussions some really useful action points, which will be interesting not to every one of the members of Opera Europa, but to the profession generally. And I would also say useful to us at Opera Europa in helping us come up with agendas and themes for future conference events or for specialist forum events as we plan the next 2 years. The Board of Opera Europa will meet during the course of this conference and we'll be discussing our plans for 22 and 2023, not to finalize the most distant ones, but in a way to set a course which will help opera companies grasp the opportunities of the future. And that's where we really need your input. The next item on the agenda is headed Changed Priorities for Opera. And I wanted, since we are here in Italy, to hear from contrasted opera houses, theatres in Italy. And the idea was to have on this platform with me a representative of one of the top 10 or 12 opera houses, and indeed the most preeminent of them all, La Scala Milan, and one of the teatri di tradizione, 28 of them, I think, now, to represent a different kind of Italian theatre, to get a snapshot of how the birthplace of opera was adapting itself and changing as we go along. But Dominique Meyer, who until earlier this week was going to be on the platform, received the day before yesterday a summons from Culture Minister Franceschini, who said he was going to turn up for a press conference in La Scala exactly now. And so that is where Dominique has to be. I'm happy to say that we still have Barbara Minghetti from Teatro Sociale di Como, and I hope we have Sebastian Schwarz, who gallantly offered to step in and represent the top 10 from his home in Teatro Regio di Torino. And here is Sebastian, who in true operatic tradition is jumping in to this session. Barbara, Sebastian, please come and join me. Thank you.
Nice skirt.
You like my tie?
Because it's from Teatro Sociale.
Barbara, I think I would like to start with you, if only to give Sebastian time to catch his breath. I have to say, one of my oldest friends in Italy, who has been, throughout the time I have known her, a fantastic support for Opera Europa in Italy, and a recruiting sergeant, as in La File de Régiment, but also someone with a remarkable experience and open mind, which takes on board festivals and traditional theatres, but also forward-looking education programs which have reached throughout Italy. Barbara was also for many years on the board of Opera Europa and served as its secretary. Barbara, you have constantly been questioning and changing things, but what do you reckon are the change priorities over the last year or two?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Scusate, sorry. I'm very happy to be here in Bergamo, in Italy, and in Bergamo especially for my friend Francesco Micheli. And I think it's always important to speak together and to share ideas. I'm always wondering why we are doing opera. We are always asking this, and why right now after these 2 years. So I think it's very difficult for everyone to speak about the project and which kind of theater and opera we want. But I think that this reflection was already old in myself and a lot of you. And I think now we have really the duty to think about this. We have the civic duty to think about this. Because our world is changed, was already changed before the COVID. We spoke a lot in Opera Europa meeting about the sense, about how to involve people in our theater. But now I feel that we have really the duty to understand what is really important for our community, what could be very important for our community. And I feel that my work of managing a theater and speaking about season and performance and which kind of performance or opera we are going to produce with which team or which kind of co-production and so on is not anymore enough. For me, is not anymore enough. I think I had to really to give back more. I want to be really inside the community to understand why opera could be still useful, because I know that the people now need a lot, need welfare, need culture, need accessibility. We have, in the last month, a research in Italy that says that the 70% of Italian people are not going in one cultural event, not even one, 70%. The other 30% are going to 1 or 2 cultural events. So it's an incredible amount of people who are not taking care about what we are doing. So I know that I have 99% of people outside my theater who doesn't know what opera is, what the meaning of the theater is. So I really want to work for them, because I know that in my city, for example, Como, Parma, where I'm working with Anna, or Macerata, where I was till this summer, that it's changed the idea of community. 10 years ago, I was only people from Como. Now I have, for example, in Como, 22 different country people. 22, it's a lot. So people who speak another language, who work with another way, who doesn't know the culture. It's really incredible amount of people who doesn't know what I'm doing. So I really want to change my idea of work and season. I want to work in a different way. As a lot of people already said, I think we had to go back to the artist, to the work of the artist, because in Italy, in the last 20 years, we worked a lot for the management of the theater. We were all with people from Bocconi, the Commerce University of Milano, very, very famous, and they teach us how to manage the amount and the money, and it was important. And not always we manage, in every case, in a good manner, because as you know, we have a lot of debt in our theater, not all, but the big one, unluckily, yes. But I think that now I need again the soul. I need again the heart of the theater. I need the art part of the theater. I want that the artist say to me which kind of performance we want to propose, which kind of format, as said Francesco. I really want to understand what could be something useful, something that can make the accessibility to the theater, because I know that the accessibility now is really closed. For money, because of course our theater, we know, are expensive. For culture, because the people doesn't know what is going on. So I really ask to all my colleagues, I make a call also to Opera Europa, to myself and to all the people, to invest money for the program, to invest money for the project, for the little project. You know, I'm very fond of little project for educational, little project of multidisciplinarity, and innovative project for young people. I think that could be the heart of a season, not only the little last part, because normally the theater invests for this kind of program like 5%, not more. And I think it's really too little, because it's something that can make again the heart, because can make something new, can make it something contemporary, that in Italy we have a big problem with contemporary, and then can make again something more open, more inclusive, and also can give more work for the young generation, because in the last 2 years in Italy, we saw, perhaps also in Europe, only the big star worked and not anymore the young people. So we need again to be in touch with them and to give them work, also if they are little. And I want also to say that I feel with all this project, we can be in relation, because I think that theater is really relation, with a big more capacity of stakeholder, not only more the public and the theater and so on. I want to be in touch with associations who take care about the difficulties of a city and of the difficulty of immigration, of power, come si dice povertà? Poorness, and of the different society of my society. So I want to work with artistic way, but also taking care about the social aspect. So why the theater cannot be part of a big process with the Ministry of Instruction, of Wellner, of the difficulties. So to be part more in the society. So I really would like to ask to everyone and to Opera Europa to find the place also to speak about really in an artistic way of which kind of new format, new way to be in touch with this community in a big sense. And not only, I know that our duty is to produce a wonderful opera, the best that we can do. I feel that is not enough anymore.
Can I ask you one question arising out of that? I mean, I think you are placing yourself in a difficult position as God. On the one hand, you're consulting artists who might want this, and on the other hand, you're consulting your community and potential public who might want that. How do you decide, how do you bring the two imperatives together? That's one question. And the second question is, how far are you willing to go to revolutionize your season?
I have to say the question is very important, as is what I want to say, and Anna Maria Meo told before. We need to change also the way to get money from the state and from the governor, because we have this law that is a very old one that give us very strict number, and we are not really allowed to make a programmation in a different way, more fluid, more different, and the little stuff are not recognized. That I think is crazy, because I believe that the little stuff for a little children could be important as also another big one. So we need help to do this. I want to ask to the state to give us the opportunity to think in a different way, to produce and to manage our architecture, economical architecture in a different way, because we need to have the opportunity to speak again with the soul, with the heart, and with artistic way. Otherwise, we produce a season with one. I'm working for Teatro di Tradizione, as you said, with Circuito Lirico Lombardo. There are also Umberto Angelini here with me. And sometimes we are not doing an artistic work. we are doing something to put something together. And I think it's not enough anymore. And I don't want to spend money of the state in this way. I really want to do something that the people need and the artists want to do, and we need really this. I don't want to manage it. I want to manage, of course, because the money is important, but I want to try to manage, but to force a little bit this. And I don't know what can expect me. Probably I will not have any more work for this. But I don't know. I sometimes when I sit down and I think we are speaking about Traviata, how we can do, and so on, I said, but is Traviata really what we want to do? I don't know. I want really to explore different things. I want young artists. I want 20 young artists in my theater who work together and to think something different and new for the future.
You're probably right that Traviata is one of the operas which Aviel will ban as being incorrect. Although it always occurs to me that the big problem with Traviata is the first scene of the second act, where quite obviously any sensible young lady would just tell Germont to piss off. And that will be the end of the opera. But that maybe then you could write it in a different...
But of course we had to do Traviata. I want to change a little bit the percentage of this. You know, now we have 100%.
But
let's try 60.
Let me give just one example, since we're on Traviata, and I know that you plan it, despite Aviel. It will be one of the operas which you will audition for in the concorso, Asico Concorso next year, and you also have plans to audition for the director and the creative team. Is this part of the change of style that you are imagining? I mean, am I wrong to be mentioning this project, or can you say a little bit about it?
No, you can say it's okay. Now, yes, also for this, because when we said the circuito, okay, we had to produce, we thought that we could produce Traviata, we decided to find a way to work with young director and to try to find a team, and we asked inside the competition to find a team who can present us not only the project of Traviata, but something more. We asked them to think something more, a project around Traviata, and something who can be more expanded than the direction of Traviata.
I'm glad you found a way of rescuing Traviata anyway. Sebastian, you come to this problem from really quite an interesting perspective. You manage a great historical theatre, which, quite apart from the pandemic, has been through some difficult times in the last 2 years. Have you found that, I mean, it must have been difficult for you, of course, in your position, but have you also found that in some sort of way liberating in making you think out of the box?
I've prepared something different, but yes.
No.
Let's look at Torino.
Say what you're going to say.
Let's definitely look at Torino for a moment, because we are part of these 12 big monsters called the so-called Fondazione Lirico-Sinfonica, who are these big cruise ships with, well, I mean, not unlike the big repertoire houses in Germany with, I mean, in the case of Torino, with 373 employees among orchestra and chorus and all the workshops and so on. When I arrived in 2019, of course, there was no thought of any pandemic. I very quickly realized that the structural deficit that I was warned of was just the tip of the iceberg, and we were looking deeper and deeper, and with the mayor together we said, okay, you brought me here to clean up, let's actually clean up, but for cleaning up we need to look very deeply. And when we reached about 9 million debt of declared debt, that was very well hidden because we all are in need of balancing our budgets at the end of the year, otherwise we would get into trouble. So the budget was balanced over the last 10, 15 years in Torino every year on the paper. It was beautifully balanced, but unfortunately only on paper. And when we reached those 9 millions, we decided within the normal course of a season, the season that had been published and that we were selling tickets to, there's no way of recuperating that ever. And plus we knew that there was probably, wherever we looked, there were more millions hidden from view. So we asked for a state intervention. The instrument for such an intervention for the government in Italy is a commissariamento, so they send somebody from the government with special authorities to deal with certain problems, sometimes having the authority to circumnavigate unions, which a normal superintendente would not be able to do, and reach results more quickly and more easily. So a commissary was sent. She continued that search for all the problems, for all the dirt that we wanted to clean up. In the end, luckily, I was proven right with that desire of bringing in somebody else with special powers, because we ended up finding 32 millions of debt hidden away in different pots and under different labels. Now, under any normal circumstances, this would have led to a bankruptcy period. Not so in Italy. Luckily, of course, for the theaters, was it in 2013, 14, a law was brought in to help the institutions, the Legge Brai law, to help the institutions that were deeply indebted, the colleague institutions of basically the other 9 or 10 big theaters. Millions were pumped into these institutions, and a control mechanism was put in place so that there would be quarterly controls from the ministry, from especially envoy from the ministries of finance and culture. So with these injections of money, let's say they work more or less well. We know that many of them still are in debt, but Torino did not enter into this Legge Brai, and well, we're now in the process of doing so. Belatedly, they've opened it up for us again so that we can profit from this. We've set in motion a control mechanism that had not been in place when I arrived. My finance director when I asked him for the actual current figures, it took him 3 days with pencil and paper to calculate and then come up with a number, which of course 3 days later was no longer the actual number of that moment. So there was just no mechanism in place to really have control. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and thank you, Aviel, for mentioning as one of the you didn't call it a priority or a change priority, but I think it definitely falls into that category. We need leaders who have, on the one hand, the competence, who have the education, the experience, the competence to lead businesses, because that's what we are. And I know our choruses and our unions and our orchestras will fight us, and they have fought me in Torino on even using the word. But with 300 plus employees, we are a business, and we have competitors we need to deal with. We have partners we need to be reliable partners to, and we're dealing with public money. So we are businesses that need managers that have the competence, but also the moral, the human integrity to be leaders in our world, with all the questions, some of them that you've mentioned, in the face of racial issues, whitewashing, yellowwashing, black-facing, and all these questions, Me Too, and all these many issues that we have to deal with, and challenges that we have to deal with. But this one particular issue of being able to deal with and having the desire to clean up. And what I did basically was I said, I will take a step backwards because that's what is needed right now for the theater. I could have found those 2.5 million and sort of balanced the budget yet again on paper. That would have been very easy to do. I had the partners ready to hand over that money so that the theater would not get into trouble. And I said, I'd rather take a step back and do what is necessary for the long-term well-being and for the actual cleaning up of the company. But that's, I was thinking of more along the lines of thinking about our stakeholders in general with the question of new, or not new, the change priorities. Thinking, who are our stakeholders? We have to think of our audiences, obviously, and we have to remember that we are part of that same society that our audiences live in. Their loss of income very likely changed their spending priorities, and therefore our income, our projected income. Plus, they've spent 1.5 years, 2 years at home without live performances of any sort. And part of that was our fault because we basically spoon-fed them our digital contents, which had another reason. We needed to keep our companies working and our chorus and orchestras working, obviously. But we've gotten them used to having everything at their disposal at the touch of a screen. So that's one of the challenges that we need to clearly overcome again to get them back into the theaters, apart from the economic issues. We have our employees as stakeholders who more than ever have an increased need of stability of employment and income, because they too have been on furlough and cassa integrazione and whatever we call that. So they have an increased need of that stability. A need, as I already said, for leaders that they can look up to and that are equipped to deal with the multifaceted challenges of the everyday life of running businesses. We have the artists who are, as you called them just before, the dispossessed artists. They're basically the stuff we're made of as theaters. And they have been suffering, as we all know. And how can we give them stability? We all know many artists, and not only artists, who've left the business who were not because they were poor artists, but simply because they couldn't pay their bills. And well, that's something we should consider. And I mean, apart from trying to recuperate whatever contracts have been lost over these years, what are other ways of making sure that in the future contracts have clauses that safeguard both sides? Of course, it's our job to safeguard the theaters, but we also need to make sure that we do have, in the long run, artists that we can employ and that don't go bankrupt just because we need to safeguard, first and foremost, the theaters, our companies. Other stakeholders, let's not forget the agencies, the artist managements. They're also part of our environment, and we rely on them as reliable filters for the identification of new artists, but also as in the communication with these artists. Whatever little fees were paid over these last few years trickled down in very homeopathic dosages down to the agencies, and we know that some of them folded. Now, of course, we leave it to them to come up with reliable and crisis-proof business models, and there's Yama to take care of, to discuss these things, but there are partners in our environment that we have to consider. There's the public sector. The coffers are empty. Funds have to be directed to more direct pandemic-related expenses. Therefore, our public contributions over time will decrease. That's something clearly we have to face. Private donors, most of our partners have suffered equally economically and will not be able to continue to sustain us at the levels we may have been used to. These just as some of the issues I think we will discuss, we are discussing, and we need to think of.
May I ask him a question? And I think also now in Italy we had to say we have also a little problem of freedom, no? We can say this? What do you think about the relation with politician and the management of the theater? Is free or there is something?
Well, I mean, we're managers in this country are, and not only in this country, are appointed by politics. I, for example, have a new mayor, and I don't know how much longer I will be in my seat, which is okay. That's just how it is in this country. But of course, it doesn't help us to plan in a long-term fashion as opera is meant to plan. So that, that's another challenge. Yes.
This is a question that also Dominique Meyer say. We were together in a meeting in Milano the last week, and he said that he was surprised at the method of Italy, that we are not appointing a new manager before then 2 months that when happen, and this is a little bit crazy as a method. And then we need also to be independent from all this stuff.
But your independence might have a price, Barbara. The thing that worries me about both of you is that quite rightly and understandably you feel a strong responsibility to the artists, preserving their livelihoods, preserving their life, but you also feel a responsibility towards the audience. They're both, if you like, stakeholders, but if you satisfy them both, isn't it going to cost a lot more?
Not necessarily. I don't think it all comes down to money. Just a tiny example. As casting managers, is there a way of us being a little more considerate to artists, to not just say there will be general auditions, let's say November 28th, and tens or hundreds of singers will apply because they are looking for jobs, when I already know I'm actually just looking for 3 singers. I'm just looking for a dramatic baritone, a dramatic mezzo, and I don't know, a high coloratura soprano. Can I maybe be a little more specific? Or can I say, at the moment, in times of pandemic, to get onto trains, onto planes, as we all did yesterday, today, and so on, is that really the thing we want to be doing? Is it really the thing that we want to be doing, to ask artists to come audition when the likelihood of them getting a job from us is fairly slim? And it's in our hands to realize and to determine how likely it is that we will actually be giving jobs to these people. So the use of digital for now, could that be something where we could help artists not to have to face the time and the expenses of traveling? Let's think about these little things that don't necessarily have to cost us money, but that make a huge difference in the life of the artist in this particular case, and many other examples like this.
The statistic that worries me most is that 70% of Italians don't attend one cultural event a year, and the number who attend opera must be less. It used to be said that in Germany, greatest of all countries when it comes to supporting opera, that only 5% of the public attended opera, which seemed to be rather a lot if you think of the German-speaking countries having a population of 80 million or so. 5% isn't so bad. But it is a question of legitimacy, isn't it? And if you lose that, the politicians who, after all, are elected will reflect the public that elects them, won't they? So in a way, I'm being provocative now, don't you have to bring back the public first before you satisfy the artists?
I think it's something circle, you know. I think in Italy, for example, we have a big problem for the education in the school. We don't have really, we have only 5 years where the music is in school from 6 to 10. And then after there is 3 years with a little, and then in high school there is no music and not art at all. So I think it could be something that makes sense if the state working together to think that culture is something essential for our community, for our awareness and responsibility. And so we had to begin again from the school, from the little by little, with a very long process, I think. We cannot now to think that we will have full again the audience in one shot, because I think it will be a long process. And normally I had to say, I was always fighting for educational project and for kids and for young. And then all the time they said, you're working for the public of tomorrow. This is something that makes me very angry, because I'm working for the public in that moment that he sit down in the audience. So the child for me is important in that moment. Then in the future we will see. So we had to work for each kind of people in a different way, in a different moment of their life, in a very long process. And to do what you are asking, I think we had to be really all together. The theater, the state, the instruction, the tourism, the fabric of the opera. We had to believe on this. And as Francesco said, that Bergamo was very colpita, very hit from the COVID, and the music was important and was useful to make it again. In Milano, for example, after the Second War, the mayor decided to build again something for the people. So Milano was destroyed by the war, and he said, what I'm going to do, a hospital or something? No, he said, I want to build Piccolo Teatro di Milano, because I know that the people need something that puts them together. So I think we all work in a different way, little by little, and in a long process.
The neglect of music in schools is not only an Italian problem, as we know.
In Germany, for example, is different.
But one of the most impressive things to me about Teatro Sociale di Como is the Opera Domani project, where you do a 75-minute version of a classic opera for fairly young kids, in which they are encouraged to participate, and which goes well beyond Como, indeed well beyond Lombardia. I remember, I think it was Nabucco, which I saw actually in Teatro Sociale, Teatro Regio di Torino, big auditorium, and there were 1,000 kids there.
Yeah.
And you said to me, oh, that's nothing. We will play this production to 100,000 kids over the course of this year. And that seemed to me to be an extraordinarily healthy investment of money in the future. And I think that, Francesco, you do different but similar things with your education project here, don't you? Do you want to come up here? I was very happy to see that one of the wonderful education officers in Como, Michela Manari, has now joined your team here in Bergamo, having moved.
In fact, you know, it's great to feel that somebody of us is part of a community, improving in these difficult years, to find new skills, new ways to create operatic format. And, you know, so, yes, I can. What I'd like to share in this moment, because, you know, each one of us in this city I lost a auntie, a cousin, a colleague, the mother of my best friend. So, in this great nightmare, it was amazing. Discover the people, separating in this house, they need a center. They need to feel there is a point in which the direction of the separate people go. And that's, I think, the beginning of the nature of opera houses in the past. It was a covered square in which we can, witness the social events of the community. I'm a spectator, but with the particular shape of the opera house, of the opera theater, each one is an actor too. And TV and the cinema changed a little bit the power of the spectator, because we are in the darkness, we see the film like a god, and we lose our power. So, Renaissance became after an awful epidemic experience in 14th century. And I don't know, perhaps I'm romantic, but I hope, I feel that this disaster can be the beginning of the new Renaissance. So I think our aim, our purpose is to demonstrate that the only or the best center of the social life of a community is opera house, because we are able to manage complex events, music, theater, words, literature, and in these months in which it was impossible to do my job as artistic director, organizing shows for live audience, I worked with psychologists, with teenagers. For example, yesterday, Riccardo, we had the general rehearsal of Elixir d'Amore with 100 teenagers, of course, studying the libretto, but working with psychologists, working, for example, as I told you, we stress the affinity of Nemorino, desiring the elixir of love, a substance able to feel himself better, more handsome, more intelligent, more clever, more smart. And this is exactly the same process of boys having drugs. And so we worked with social abstinence and explain how, alcohol and coffee too are drugs, for example. In fact, Elixir d'Amore is Bordeaux, is a bad Bordeaux. So opera now for us in Bergamo is only the final step of a long social, political, the co-production, FAST is a good presence in Italy so far. And for example, the co-production of Fidio Regimon is with the Communist Theater of La Habana. And I'm waiting the extreme right part of this city screaming because we are putting communists on stage. So the opera, the show, is the last step of the social process involving different kind of people with different skills. So we try to explain you our projects, but my next purpose is help the teenagers to leave the opera house like their house. So opening the spaces for in the morning with the school, but more in the afternoon. For example, we are working for the statement of the new bar, and we are writing the rules, and we want that young boys, young people, try to keep this the management of the bar and offering not only coffee or gin and tonic, but cultural project using our laboratories, etc. So, because people leave opera house like a castle surrounded by crocodiles and water. So, I think COVID experience, it's a fundamental occasion to demonstrate that we are not I mean, something hidden for rich and old people, but real, the main cultural, and not only cultural, square of the city.
So you need a building.
Yes, I need.
And now the church is dead, so I shouldn't say that in here.
This is a good metaphor.
The opera house takes over from the church.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
yes, with the project, we need the theater, but normally a lot of this kind of project go outside the theater to coming back. So I think we know that it's important with European Opera Days. We make experiences that it's also important to go outside, to meet the people outside in different places, in something that is not so with structure and could make a distance. And then, of course, the people had to come back to the theater.
But in fact, I mean, opera born in the top of Renaissance exactly by, I mean, the most important families in Florence, in Venice, to take the power of the church, suggesting a new model of life with new values. And in fact, the opera is born in a couch in Parma. Teatro Farnese is the first model crossing, I mean, the king reception room with a square, with the temple. So, I mean, the right is our main skill that in this very difficult moment we have to keep.
You would make a good priest, Francesco. I mean, even if a communist.
I mean, Dulcamara is a friend of us.
He would be a great Graham Greene character.
May I say something also with the method you speak about the young, you spoke about Opera Domani. I think also the way of make experience for the young people is also to let them participate with something, with active, with, and I would like, I'm sorry, to make a remember of Graham Vick, who explained me so well how it's important to let the people, normal people, to be inside the project and to be participate in a process of opera. He was for me so inspiring, and I had to say a lot of this kind of participate in community project are really begin with him. So only to say thanks, Graham.
The catchword we're seeking is belonging, isn't it? Do you think? Do you think the same? I mean, look, we have on my left a real European who speaks most of its languages and has lived in various different parts of it. In what sense is the Italian experience different from the Austrian or English or Czech or German or?
It's a very political experience. I think about what I mentioned before, it's a very political experience. We do all want to carve out the space to actually be talking about art and the contents, and but we're always faced with political obstacles of clearly the ruling party of a city, of a region, of the government opposing those who are not the leading parties, and therefore having that discrepancy there and those fights that, of course, make it into the theater via the unions that are heavily politicized. And so there's never a level of let's just work together on a project, because there will always be the factions that fight each other. And that is, I've never experienced that anywhere as much
really?
As here.
Not even in Hungary or Russia or?
I've never worked in Hungary, so I don't know. But
I'm not pontificating. I'm just asking the question.
But usually totalitarian regimes, as Hungary, I guess, can be at the moment can be described as such. Since they don't allow the opposition, there is one line that is taken, right? It's that party line, and we all create whatever is okay with that one party. So it limits other choices, but it is a line and where everyone is united to create. Here, you're constantly fighting. You go into a rehearsal and the rehearsal is interrupted by the various factions of the various unions that again represent different parties, and you cannot get to work. And you first have to go down and calm the waters and remind people that actually there's an opening night 3 days away from now, and shouldn't we be working on that, and leave the other issues on the side. I would like to come back to something Barbara said about contents, because we know from business that a company that does not invest 25% of its revenue in R&D, research and development, is doomed to lose their product over the course of the next 10, 15 years. How much, and you mentioned 5%, you would like to be able to invest 5%, and that it is not enough for you. Why should opera as a business be so different from any industrial product? We are producing in contents, and as Francesco was saying, basically he's producing experiences. We know that participation in the English language, it's so beautiful because the departments are usually called outreach and participation or participatory projects. Here it's always everything under the mantle of education. Yes, there are educative experiences, but we reach real education and change by producing participatory experiences and reaching out to invite people to participate. I think what we really need, and one of the bigger challenges here and priorities here should be in Italy, should be to really look at a reform of what we offer in the theaters in terms of on our stages, not just surrounding, bringing people in, but because we can lure people in by giving them an amazing participatory experience, and then they come to see yet another Nabucco or yet another Traviata or yet another something that is staged in a way where we would, if we really want to be positive, want to say it's like a wonderful museum of how things were done, and then people won't come back, even though they've had this amazing experience. But the real experience in the theater, and which sort of is our ultimate goal, to get them as paying customers to pay tickets for the opera, they will be sent away again. So to invest more into telling our stories, into telling the stories of our life at the moment. Not to, ring my own bell or something, but I'm planning for next summer the world premiere of an opera called Opera Italiana, which tells the life in Italy in the 60s, 80s, and zeros, in an attempt to really just get people to realize that that's really what opera is. We're telling about the lives of people. In this case, it will be people we can relate to because they're not princes and knights and whatnot, or mythological figures. That's just one little way, and I know that you're all doing that all the time by commissioning new works. It is not the case in Italy, and the percentage of new opera happening in this country is staggeringly low, and well, how do we expect people to come and find something they can relate to unless it is modern stagings? And then we get into a whole different discussion about modern approaches to staging. But new content and research and development, I think, is one of the big issues that is one of the new priorities for this country.
I think those are very important points, Sebastian, and I think the question about, I don't know how quite one defines R&D in opera, but how much you should invest in it is an interesting one. And I would guess that in Como, you probably do invest 25% in opera education in its broadest sense, don't you?
Yes, because it's our aim, objective, and so we invest money and we invest ideas, we invest in the future. And I had to say that also to Sebastian, I think now also the theater had to speak about sustainability and Agenda 2030. And the Azienda now had to do this also. So we had to be big corporate. They had to make investment to the community. So perhaps in this also we can make something circle together. So to try to force the azienda to invest in this part of the program that could be for the theater as a social responsibility. So it could be something, but we have to work all together. This is the real fight.
I want just now to raise a procedural point. Those of you who've regularly come to Opera Europa conferences will realize that the first afternoon is normally boring people like us, talking while you have to be silent and obedient, and that as the conference goes on and as the wine flows, you become more articulate and jump in, and by the end it's impossible to stop you. So I don't entirely apologize for it being a little bit presidium from us here today, and I want to alert you to the fact that tomorrow will be much more of a dialogue. We begin tomorrow morning with an address from a singer to hear a strong viewpoint from a practicing artist. We then, in a way, pick up this afternoon's theme with a short panel of four interesting different people who will throw out ideas and challenges. And then we will break into four separate groups so that it becomes easier to interrupt than it is for you on the floor today. If any of you is absolutely burning to ask us a question, I would ask you to walk down the aisle, so to speak, and come up and grab the vacant microphone. But it's a bit of a tall order to ask that, I think. And I think it just might be better, unless somebody is putting up their hand to do that. So I've taken my spectacles off so I can't see. No one. I think some of you will have traveled today and you will want to be at your most beautiful for this evening. It might be nice to allow you to go back to your hotels 7 minutes early and look forward to seeing you at... Do you want to say anything about this evening, or is it going to be a wonderful surprise?
So tonight we did decide to open our festival exactly by means of a young project, the Bottega Donizetti. Alex Esposito with six young talented singers, working about the interpretation, the body, the political reasons to be a singer. So in a weird storytelling, telling two stories, but in reality the same. Alex Esposito and Gaetano Donizetti are two Bergamasques, a city very hidden, and from this city they fly by means of music for all the world. So it's an experimental format in which you have a great singer, but like a father of this singer, six wonderful expression of the future.
Esposito is a wonderful singer. And what is also wonderful about it is a relatively short evening, and it belies the aphorism that life is short and opera is long. So it will be not too long after that before it is possible to mingle and talk and have something to eat and drink. But for now, I think I would just like to thank very much Sebastian and Barbara and Francesco for their contributions this morning. Thank you for being such polite listeners. Don't go on being polite, though, for the rest of the days. And I look forward very much to seeing you this evening.